Walking out to the cage, I try and make friends with the crowd. I'm just loving life. I am on cloud nine. I am as happy a person as there's ever been.
Introducing first, Smalling Sam Alvey.
It's so hard to make people understand the adrenaline rush that comes to you while it's happening. I was a band nerd. I played trumpet, and I was one of those nerdy kids that ended up having a good cross. I wasn't supposed to be a fighter. I stumbled into this. And I love fighting. I love the opportunity to fight. I know how good I am. The first 4 years of my career, I think I was 12-2 maybe before I moved out to California and got real training. I was just winging it. So when I was put among the best in the world with the UFC, I won a lot of fights. I got a lot of knockouts in the UFC. I was entertaining. Everyone knew when you turned into a Smiling Sam fight, there was going to be some bombs thrown. And I didn't finish as strongly as I would have liked to, but my own little way, I'm part of the history books.
He doesn't tap, he goes to sleep.
I know if I go to any other league in the world, I'm going to dominate it.
Smiling Sam Alvey. Wow, he did it.
I wanted to talk a little bit about concussions, micro traumas, CTE.
Most people couldn't tell you what CTE stands for.
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast. Hello, and thank you for listening to the Patina'd Podcast. Just a quick note with this episode with Smiling Sam Alvey. I'm having some storm issues here in Northern California, which is really late for the season, but we're having snow today. So if you're hearing rain in the background or snowdrops or an annoying sound in the back, I do apologize. That was not expected for today's episode. And then also, we did deal with some kind of internet glitching and stuff like that. Hopefully in the post edit, I can kind of sequence that together so that it's not too bad for you to be able to listen to the episode. Otherwise, great interview. You're really going to enjoy it. Thanks for listening. All right. Well, welcome to the Patina'd Podcast. Today I have Smiling Sam Alvey. And as you can tell with his trademark smile, Sam Alvey has 54 professional MMA fights, 24 in the UFC alone, which is a fantastic, lengthy career for the UFC. Father of 6. Is it 6 now?
Yep, I've got 6.
Dude, awesome. That's amazing. I got 4
you've got
boys
4.
myself.
You're catching up to me too.
Yeah. I got 4 boys myself, and God willing, we'll see if that grows. And yeah, and Sam's also a husband, a coach, recently a taco truck owner as well. So branching out within the world of food industry, I guess.
So it's a deep dish Chicago style pizza truck.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. That's my favorite kind of pizza.
Oh, it's America's pizza.
It's so good. We got a place out here in Sacramento called Chicago Fire, and so they have regular pizzas, but their only pizza, in my opinion, is the deep dish. It's so stinking good.
Oh, yeah. It's so the best.
Sam Alvey, man, you have one of the most legendary runs in the UFC, maybe not in a good way. And we'll just tap on that a little bit because I think it points to resiliency. And so an incredible run of 9 straight bouts without a win. And I'm saying that with all due respect, because here we are now as Smiling Sam Alvey is the heavyweight champion of combat karate, right? And so, just incredible. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And I guess if you're okay with that, we can start with that, because in terms of people who know you already, they might know about that streak and that run of 9 straight bouts without a W, even though some of those decisions maybe are fishy. And there was one particular loss you got that you seem to still be with it pretty well, and maybe it was called too early. But yeah, I think I just want to start talking with that a little bit, because the theme of this show is resiliency. And so, yeah, what's your take on that run that you had?
Yeah, so I needed a record, and it's hard to get records. Like, I have the 5th highest takedown defense rating in UFC history. Nobody talks about that. They all talk about I have the streak of 8 or 9 fights without a win. And, the worst part about it is everyone, when people are razzing me online, like everyone will, they say, "Aren't you that guy that lost 7 or 8 in a row?" And it sounds so lame. I'm just like, no, because I didn't win 7 or 8 in a row. And you're gonna think, no. But I am with you. If you watch those 8 fights, like, I won 4 of them. One of them was a draw. It was crazy how many bad decisions I was a part of. But I didn't win, so I didn't win. And I love fighting. I love the opportunity to fight. I know how good I am. I know if I go to any other league in the world, I'm going to dominate it. So when I was put among the best in the world with the UFC, I won a lot of fights. I got a lot of knockouts in the UFC. And I didn't finish as strongly as I would have liked to, but my own little way, I'm part of the history books as long as Tony Ferguson gets a win here pretty quick.
Yeah, I think so. You're rooting for Tony for more than one reason. I think everybody else is a fan of Tony. Yeah. Everybody else who's a fan of Tony would like to see him go out with the W, but yeah, man, that's funny. Where is he at? Do you know what his streak is at?
He's at 7.
Is it 7? That's what I thought. Yeah.
So he's beaten my streak of losing, but he hasn't beaten my streak of not winning. So.
Well, in there too, you had so many fights that were canceled last minute. You had so many fights that were just like, I don't know the story behind who got injured or why the fights were canceled or whatever, but
it was never me.
If you look at anybody who's listening, look at the list of canceled fights in between all the other fights that actually took place. How was it handling that?
You only get paid when you fight, and I'm very pleased with what the UFC pays. I've never complained. I think they pay way more than they probably should, but you only get paid when you fight. So if I'm 3 weeks away from a fight and my opponent backs out, or I'm 3 days away from a fight and my opponent backs out, I mean, my option is don't get paid or say, all right, I'm ready. I can beat anyone in the world right now, and I'll take them. And there are a couple of fights I probably shouldn't have, like 9 of them I shouldn't have. But there are a few of them that were like real stretches for me that I was convinced I could do it, and I just overestimated how good I was or how prepared I was. And that's just the name of the game.
When you're looking at it, someone can come in and say on that streak or on that run, there were bouts where the judging didn't go your way. And I remember one specific fight. I can't remember who it was against, but I remember the ref calling it off, standing over you, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, so there's plenty of excuses for that loss, but they kept bringing you back, and they kept bringing you back, and they kept bringing you back. And what do you count for that? Why do you suppose the UFC kept wanting to be in the Sam Alvey business?
Well, part of it is I was an entertaining fighter. Like, you can say what I will about me, if I'm the greatest fighter that's ever been or not. But I was entertaining. Everyone knew when you turned into a Smiling Sam fight, there was going to be some bombs blown or thrown. And I was going to land some. I might take some, but I was going to be an entertaining fight. So I think that was first and foremost. Secondly, people like me. I'm a very charming individual. And with the UFC, I was with them for close to 9 years. And I got to know the entire organizations. I mean, it was every Christmas, my wife and I, we would send a letter and a $5 gift card from Starbucks to everyone that works for the UFC, from the janitor to Dana White. They would all get a Starbucks gift card. I loved my UFC family. I loved everyone I got to be with. They came into town here for in Nashville. They had a show this last summer. My wife and I took the food truck out there, and we gave them lunch. She said, "Oh, here's what I'm up to now, guys. It's good to see all of you." So it was a lot of fun getting to see my friends from years in my hometown now. And that was just, it was kind of what it was. Then the third thing about me was I said yes to every fight, whether I should or shouldn't. I've helped the UFC more than once on last minute replacements, and I shouldn't have on a couple of them, but you know what? I'm always going to say yes. And they could rely on me for that.
It's something that I've heard Daniel Cormier talk about maybe 3 or 4 times in different interviews, where he's talking about not necessarily using the word company man, but saying like, treat the company well and they're going to treat you well and they're going to take
Yeah.
care of you. And so not trying to every opportunity you get, blast them on some interview here or there, especially if you're a big name fighter, right? And I would imagine, I don't know Dana White from Adam, but being a fan of UFC since UFC 1, since I was a child, that's not somebody that you want to talk bad about and not reap consequences of it, right? So yeah, I think that's good information for anybody in any company.
I tell all of my amateurs, all my young pros, listen, guys, the most important thing ever is win. The second most important thing, that's almost as important as the first one, is be likable, be remembered. Make sure people know your name. Every time you have the opportunity to do that extra 10%, do it, even if nobody's watching. Just make sure that you give everyone the opportunity to remember you, to like you, to want to watch you. And so many fighters don't take that advice. So many fighters are worried about just the first step, win, which is a big step. But you have to be remembered. And that was something I did really well. I was a band nerd. I wasn't supposed to be a fighter. I stumbled into this. I played trumpet, and that's what I was supposed to do. I graduated college. I was one of those nerdy kids that ended up having a good cross. And the part of me that outside of the winning, which is most important, I was just very willing to talk to everyone. I was very willing to do every interview. I mean, I do so many interviews. Even now, I'm not in the UFC. I'm the karate combat champion, but I do 4 or 5 interviews a week still. I it's just, you'll know now. I tell, when we set it up online, I say, please remind me the morning of, because if you don't, I'm not going to remember it's going to happen. I schedule them for almost the same time every day, and I just try and remember what days so I don't double book. But every now and then I'll double book just because I'm very excited to be able to talk to anyone that is interested in me. Any way I can help bring light to the sport, whether it's UFC, karate combat, or MMA in general. I want to be that guy that's just an open book for anyone that's interested in learning more about it.
Yeah. And so you kind of talked a little bit about that origin story, being a band guy and that sort of stuff. But along the way, there had to be something that helped begin to shape this mentality that you have, which is show up, work hard, be likable, that sort of thing. So were there any particular experiences early on in life, childhood, or anything like that, where you began to realize that these are characteristics you want to use?
I have maybe the best parents in the world. My mom and dad are just wonderful people. Both of them. My mom has got the bigger personality probably, but my dad is that hardworking guy who's funny always. And I think I took the best of both of them. I'm just anything I'm doing, whether it's fighting or band nerding or just hanging out at a school. I'm that guy that will always be 10% more than everyone else. It's just who I am at this point. My dad growing up, my mom, so he got 2 things. My dad's was can't means don't want to. So there's nothing you can't do. He made me say it all the time. The pen is lighter than the pick. He said, be as intelligent as you can be. You want to make the road so you don't have to swing the pick. He swung a pick his whole life. And then my mom always said, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. So I just kind of took those 3 sayings and I just made them who I am. There's nothing I can't do. I don't worry about anything, and I will put in more work and be as intelligent about it as I can.
You began picking that up and kind of taking that as you were aging. Now, there's something else you have going on, which is, the likable side, which also probably goes into a level of creativity and entrepreneurship. But I think you opened your gym like really early, and even maybe before MMA was becoming, like, as MMA was just becoming a thing in your area as you're growing up. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
So like I said, I was a band nerd. I was a nerdy kid. I thought I was a lot tougher than what I loved. Dragon Ball Z and Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. Jackie Chan is the greatest actor that's ever been. I loved that stuff. So when I went to college, I'm just did me. I found an instructor, Mr. Metz, and he taught weapons like the Ninja Turtles, size and nunchucks and stuff like that. So I started taking lessons with him, and he ran a Kenpo karate studio. And then I took the weapons class 2 or 3 times a week, and I started getting pretty good with it. And from there, I discovered MMA. I started doing some pancration stuff, which is no contact to the face. And then I started fighting. didn't train a day, did no training with it. But once they started fighting, I asked him, hey, could I, run some classes in the back or do this in the back? He said, yeah, go for it. So it wasn't my gym, but I was the head coach of this MMA project. He and I started together. Metz's Combat Club is who we were, and we turned out to be. We built one of the best MMA gyms in the state. And it's funny because he had the striking with his Kempo karate background, but I had nothing. I just made it up as I went. I didn't start watching YouTube until like last year. So at the beginning, I was just making it up. I had wrestled before, so there was a lot of conditioning from wrestling. And jiu-jitsu doesn't matter if they can't take you down, so there's a lot of takedown defense kind of stuff. And I was just winging it. But yeah, the first 4 years of my career, I was the head coach of the gym that I made, and I did really well. I think I was 12-1 before I or 12-2 maybe before I moved out to California and got real training, or more training with people that could beat me up, with a group of people that could beat me up. And I just had a blast doing it. It was like the dream come true that I could step in and just start doing what I wanted to do. And it couldn't happen again. MMA has gotten too mainstream. Like, it would be hard to train yourself like I did now. But I did it then, and now I'm spreading my knowledge, my years of training up. I'm even trying to spread my bad habits that I developed from being the head coach. I'm trying to spread those to people. My bad habits are great habits for me, would be terrible for anyone else. But if I can train my kids or my students or anyone else to do the same bad things I do really well, it'll work just as well for them.
I just wanted to take a quick pause and genuinely thank you for getting this far through the episode. This podcast is very small, if you haven't noticed. So every like, every comment, every follow or subscribe, it really makes a difference. So my only request from you is to interact with the content if you like it. Like and follow, rate and review, and share if you feel like this is something that's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much. And was that move to California, was that with Team Quest?
Yep. That's what I moved out with Dan Henderson. I didn't know who Dan Henderson was till he shook my hand and said, I'm Dan Henderson. Hey, Dan, I'm Sam. And then he beat the brakes.
It's a good Dan Henderson impression. So you didn't know who Hendo was before you actually met him?
No, I didn't know what the UFC was until I was probably 8-1 as a professional. Wow. I didn't start training until I was 1 or 2-0 as a professional. I was just winging it. I eventually figured it out. I want to say Brock Lesnar might have been like the first guy I ever heard of from fighting, because I was and still am huge WWE fan. Like, that is my dream job, is the WWE. But I might be aging out of the WWE, as much as I hate to admit it.
Oh man. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not.
I'm making steps to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, you're your current heavyweight champ where you're at now. So, hopefully. And yeah, so with Hendo, I'm in my gym right now, which is a shipping container. And I got right over here, about 5 feet away, the infamous photo of Hendo soaring like an eagle with the H-bomb over Bisping. Bisping's already out, chin up in the air, just waiting to receive a free bomb to the chin. So I watched that live, and that was man, I don't know. There was 1 or 2 BJ Penn moments, but that moment was probably one of the greatest, because it was, it was like America versus Britain, right? Like that was the sales pitch at the time. And so, yeah, to see that live, that was incredible. So years later, got married, went to Bali, and fantastic painter out there in Bali. I had him paint that image. And so I have an oil painting here in my gym of Hendo soaring over Bisping. So one of these days, I'll hope to get Hendo on this podcast and show him that picture. I'm like, look, dude, like, this is awesome. Yeah. You made a mark on me. One of your fights that I was watching, one of the commentators had mentioned that Dan Henderson said that you have maybe the hardest punch that he's ever felt.
Yeah.
During a bout. So that's really high praise from somebody who has the H-bomb, right? He has a title tagged to his right hand. Yeah. So to be able to get that's pretty incredible.
You know what? I was so blessed to get to work with Hendo like I have for so long. I mean, he is just And as good as I am, he's better. He's the man. He has got so much talent in his career of both wrestling, and he went to college to wrestle, but he actually went to college because he wanted to play baseball. He just didn't get there. And he's just an athlete. And so I was able to work with him, and I have a lot of his good habits. I have some of his bad habits, but one of my favorite things that I've helped develop through him is my punch. I call mine the A-bomb. He's got the H-bomb. I'm the A-bomb for alley bomb. I even 2 fights ago. So when I won the Karate Combat heavyweight title, I A-bombed Ross Levine. Like, I did the same punch. Feet left the ground, came down with the punch. It was so cool. I was sitting in the hospital getting my everything x-rayed, and I texted Endo, I got him. I A-bombed him.
Yeah, so I watched that on YouTube, and I couldn't see the punch on the camera angle. I couldn't see what happened. Okay. But that was my assumption, because in combat karate, am I saying it right?
Karate combat, but yeah.
Karate combat. I'm dyslexic. Sorry. So karate combat, and I am literally, but karate combat, in which you're the current heavyweight champ of, and relatively quickly assume that title over there. And we can even talk about your most recent fight that happened a week ago or something. But yeah. So in that arena, which is incredible, they have this concaved like a mat and things, and the fights are super fast and all this stuff. They allow, I believe the rule is 5 seconds. So if you knock somebody down, you get 5 seconds of some sort of ground and pound, right?
Yeah, they just changed the rule. So my fight against Ross Levine was the last fight that they had that. Now, as long as I'm trying to finish him, they'll let me ground and pound. As long as my knees aren't on the ground.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a big change. That's a big change. I wonder how some of the karate guys are feeling about that change.
They're playing with it. It's such a responsive sport, and it's so new. I mean, I think they were around in 2017 or 18, and they just incorporated. You don't have to have just a karate background, a striking background. Now they're putting in there as well. And he said the goal is, karate is the most dominant form, but we need to be able to implement the other forms too to prove karate is the best.
Okay. Okay, well, how do you feel about that? Karate's the best. How do you feel about that?
It depends on what you're doing for. I think if you look at the great karate fighters in the UFC, the highest promotion there is, they were all dominant for a long time. Wonderboy Thompson, Lyoto Machida, Anthony Pettis. If you go down the list of who the karate guys were that were there, they have a lot of success. But you don't get many karate guys going in there. And I think part of it is because you don't have the full contact aspect in karate until you're in the UFC. You have the point sparring. Karate combat is that bridge. Karate combat is where you take the point sparring and you put it with the full contact. Something karate fighters, taekwondo fighters, the traditional martial art fighters have. They have speed that MMA fighters do not. At least on their hands and their feet.
Accuracy too, right? Yeah.
Oh, they can snap it up there. MMA fighters, most of them have adopted the Muay Thai style, which isn't particularly fast, but it's powerful. They'll get the kicks high, they'll get the kicks low, and they'll go. But there's a setup for everything. In the traditional martial arts, there's no setup. You just use that front foot high, front foot low. You throw that back foot without the switch. It's just a much faster fighting style. And so now that they have karate combat in there, which is a goal for karate fighters to get to, I think you'll start seeing a lot more of the traditional martial art athletes stepping up to the MMA world, because they have that. They now see what could be there for them.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like that ability to, as a newer company, to be able to adjust and try to grow and try to figure out, how it's going to work and make it most appealing, most entertaining, but also most competitive. I really like that. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I love the league too, because you don't have to. I love jiu-jitsu. I like wrestling and all that stuff. But in any MMA fight, that is the boring part. That is when it hits the ground. It's like, oh, all right, it's back up. Karate combat has done away with the ability to just hold someone down and look for the submission. They've taken all the boring parts of an MMA fight and done away with them. So it is a much faster paced combat sport than anything else out there. And I'm just thrilled with it. It is. I have so much fun watching the karate combat format. And since before I was signed with them, I haven't missed one. I've seen the last, I'll bet you 10 in a row. And they're just so much fun to watch. And then you have Boss Rutan, who is the personality of all personalities, commentating.
Mm-hmm.
He's so much fun to listen to. And then they have a rotating list of superstars that come and commentate with him. I have a blast watching it. I'm so honored that they saw something in me that they wanted to get me in there, and then I got that title fight out of there. And I'm just gonna try and run with that title for as long as I can, and enjoy every fight I get to watch between now and whenever.
Yeah. So let's kind of tap back into some of this resiliency stuff, and we're going to go back to some of these losses. So one of the things your wife is in there. Did I watch a fight of yours where she wasn't in the corner?
Yes. So I've got over 80 fights total. There have been 2 fights she has not been to. Only one in the UFC. So when COVID started, we were my wife and I, we were in the foster system. We were working on adopting a baby. Because of that, because we were in the foster system, our little girl wasn't allowed to cross state lines. And so the option is we would have to give her to someone for 3 or 4 days as we went and did this. And there's no way in hell we were giving that little girl to anyone else. Mm-hmm. So the only thing we could do is either lie about it, which we couldn't do because if we got caught, they would take her. Yeah. Or one of us had to stay. And since I was fighting, my wife had to stay. So that is really the only fight she ever missed. Then the other fight she missed was my first fight out of the UFC. It just lined up that her brother was getting married the same day, and she just couldn't make it.
Yeah.
But other
brother's
than that,
marriage.
Yeah. And it was a fight I was supposed to win. It was a fight I was just getting somebody to get back in the win column. And it killed her not to be there, but it's just the way it worked out. I couldn't find a fight anywhere else. I looked for so long to get anyone to fight, and I finally found someone, and I couldn't turn it down.
And so with that, how does she handle losses for you in the corner? I can't imagine how it would be for my wife. How does she handle, especially the knockout losses, the more kind of brutal ones, or the
never been knocked out.
When you went unconscious. Sorry, unconscious from a choke. Unconscious from a choke. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, it's
forgive me. That's my memory. But yeah, so how does she handle that one? Like the ones that are kind of more scary.
Oh, she handles me being hurt just fine. It's like, whatever, heal up. But man, I feel like such a loser. She doesn't have that. Some wives have that mothering instinct. Like, I'll make you feel better right now. It's like I get back and say, why didn't you do what I told you to do? I'm your corner. It's like, oh, sorry. She hates that I tell her that. But man, she is terrible to me terrible in a good way when I lose. Like, oh man, just give me 5 minutes to feel like a loser before you make me feel like a loser. But we have a really good relationship in and out of the cage. We work together constantly. She knows what I'm great at. She knows better than what I'm worse at. And we've had a really good relationship as far as competition goes. When I lose, it hurts her as much as it hurts me. And when I win, she's probably even happier than I am.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that would feel like as a spouse. Have you? And so she hasn't been in any professional fights. I know she trains though, right? Or am I?
Oh yeah, no, we're working on getting her in the Karate Combat League. She has trained as long as I have. She just hasn't fought. She's been pregnant
for like 10 straight years or something.
Yeah, just something like that. Yeah. We're talking a Karate Combat. I don't want her to fight without getting paid. I just don't think it'd be worth it to her. She's America's Next Top Model. She is the prettiest thing that's ever been. She's worth something to someone. So we're kind of shopping around, and she's also a neonatal surgeon or real close to it, and she's working on her middle. She's smarter than anyone has any right to be. And so if she doesn't fight, she won't fight, but she's very interested in it.
I can't. Watching my kids lose a match in wrestling, I'm like, I feel my jaw clench, and like this feeling empathy towards them, but also anger and like all these weird conflicting feelings toward maybe another 9-year-old. And so, yeah, I can't imagine how she deals with your losses. Now, that being the case, I know there was at least one fight where you had kids ringside, correct?
There've been a lot of fights.
How do they handle that now?
They love it. I mean, they don't like it when I lose, but they love
Yeah.
watching me fight. And I've won most of my fights. So most of my career, they've been just thrilled to watch and so happy to see it. And they brag about me to their family. And when I won the karate combat belt, they all asked to take the belt to school. So they all took turns, one at a time. They got to take it
Wow.
and showed up. That they love it so much. And it's funny is if something happens, I get eye poked. I get eye poked a lot. I get eye poked or groin shotted or head butted or whatever. They will defend me to the death. I mean, they will. That is the first words out of their mouth. And the other guy was cheating the whole time. I mean, he poked the eyes like blah blah blah, and he did this and he did that. They go on about how I was wronged during the fight, and then they go into but this is how he won. That I'll bet you they've memorized every punch I've thrown.
Hmm. How is that? Because that would be probably just behind maybe drowning or being buried alive. That would be the other fear, is telling my kids that dad lost in that way, or dad, like, worse would be for me, because the sports in which I compete in is like ultra running or something, right? But so for me, it would be not
knocked out doing that.
Yeah, that'd be bad. But it'd be more like it'd be more like daddy quit would be my version of daddy lost, would be daddy quit. And there's nothing more scary to me, again, maybe other than being buried alive or drowning or something. So for you, how is that like trying to help them process that loss? How is that for you?
Well, they know what it takes for me to get into that cage. They see me at the gym 6 hours a day, every day of the week. I mean, for the whole year, they see what it takes, and that they can see me have my successes. That's wonderful. That they can see me have the setbacks. I prefer them not to, but they know how to deal with it now. I take my losses on the chin. Pun intended. I handle them well. I give myself 24 hours to feel like a sad sack, and then I'm over it. Then I'm moving on to the next thing. So to give them the opportunity to see somebody lose, in front of the world, but then pull themselves back up and get back to work I think that there's something to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's more important than the wins.
It might be. I really like showing them the wins a lot more than I like showing them the loses.
It's more fun. It's more fun for sure.
Fun.
But the lesson, because just in terms of life things, you fail more than you win. Like they're little micro fails, but you fail more than you win. So let's say I want to be in the gym at 8 a.m. and then you're at the gym 8:30 because you were just taking too much time getting your tennis shoes on or something.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's technically a micro fail sort of thing, right? But so in the grand scheme of things, failure, you're going to probably feel more often, even just on a minor level, than the big wins. But it's so important to be normalized to the idea of failure and then getting back up and trying again, like getting back up on the path that you're on and saying, maybe I got to shift some things and adjust some things, but this is still my goal and I'm going to continue toward it. I think that's massive.
Yes, no, 100%. They do they wrestle and they do jiu-jitsu and they do baseball. We have them competing constantly. And so they have lost. They've lost probably more than anyone wants to lose. But they also win, and they see what it takes to, overcome the losses because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. Okay. It's more than you having a large family. It's you being a present father. Like today, we were able to adjust this so that you can go and pick them up from school because they had an early day of school, right? And you're like, okay, interview, fine. But no, I have to take care of my family first, right? So that's why I had no problem with you asking for a change. It's like, I understand. So family first. And then, so you have to balance that. Now you have a food truck, pizza deep dish business. You still have an active fighting career. You still have coaching at the gym. Tell me if I'm missing something, but you have a whole plethora of things going on that are tugging at you. I think you might also have farm animals and stuff. I think you also live on some property. So you have that as well. So how are you adjusting, like handling farm, children, everything I just said? How do you balance that and make time for it all?
I have no idea how to make time for it all. I mean, I really don't. I don't watch TV anymore. Like, it doesn't happen. the kids got off school because of a rainstorm or something. So I got to take them to a movie, and that was the first time I've seen a movie in God knows how long. It's just something I'm just constantly going. I'm up, it's, before 6 to get the kids up and ready for school. And then I go to the gym, and then I do this and that. It's always something. My wife and I, we make an incredible team, and we do it mostly by never seeing each other. We are always running somewhere, something away from each other. We've got there's this app called Marco Polo. It's like a video text message, and we're on that all day long together. It's kind of how we talk. We always end up catching up around dinner time most of the time. Dinner, get everyone, all 6 of them to bed, and then we go to bed. Wow. It's a busy life. I'm thrilled to be part of, in it, and the goal is be very successful at all of it. So someday it's not as busy a life, but it's the way it is.
And you said your wife is also in school or something too, right? Like, or she's about to be, like, would you say a medical doctor or something? So she's got a whole plethora of things to do as well.
Yeah. So she graduated college years ago with a bachelor's in biochemistry and then also politics and government, but she wanted to be a neonatal surgeon. That was her goal. Then we had our first kid, and she said, yeah, I don't want to be in school for 8 more years. I don't want to have that kind of schedule. So she's been the stay-at-home mom. She manages fighters. She keeps the house perfect. And now I'm out of the UFC. We're as busy as can be. And she said, you know what? I want to get back into stuff. So she's going to become a midwife. She's decided she loves babies more than anything else on this planet. And she is now going to go and deliver babies every day of the year, or as many days of the year as she can. And that's her new goal in life, is to become a midwife. And she's doing it. I don't know how we have the time to do it, but we're making it happen. When I need something, she covers for me. And when she needs something, I cover for her. And we've got a hell of a system with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like a great team. I wanted to talk a little bit about concussions, micro traumas, CTE, and just kind of talk about that a little bit. So, like you said, you've never been knocked out in a fight. Never been knocked out. I don't know about what's going on with Dan Henderson at the gym. But
yeah, I actually just made a YouTube video a few days ago about CTE and concussions and stuff. And it seems to be, especially being a fighter, anytime I have a differing opinion from someone, the first thing, CTE is speaking. And it's like, most people couldn't tell you what CTE stands for. They couldn't tell you the symptoms of it. They couldn't tell you anything about concussions. But it's a threat you throw at fighters, or an insult you throw at fighters. When in honesty, it's not nearly as easy to get concussions as everyone thinks. You can get them, and I've probably had 2 or 3 in my career, which isn't that. I mean, it's more than the average person, but it's not that much. Everyone, the internet, the world appears to think that you get hit in the head, you have a concussion, and they're not that easy to get. And every time I'm in a fight, post-fight, I am paying attention to everything. I'm looking at any memory loss. I'm, if anything tastes different, if my eyes are doing anything funny, if I've got memory loss, I'm paying attention to it. And it doesn't happen often. I have had a couple fights. Nate Marquardt got me real well. I fought a guy named Trey McNitt years and years ago. I think he got me. And those are the only 2 that I would be convinced I got it from. 2 weeks ago, I was headbutted from hell in the middle of my fight. Fight got called no contest. It was a rough end to the fight. And I went all weak-kneed there for a minute. But after the fight, I started looking at everything. I started testing myself. I started having my wife test me. I had no symptoms of anything. I remember it. I remember the fight. I remember the hit. I remember every part of it. I haven't forgotten anything. My eyes never did anything funny. So it's something we are aware of, but it's something that is a possibility. It's a dangerous sport, but we're very careful with it, because if it starts to happen, if I start to see any changes in my personality or in my physical being, we're going to make adjustments. And it hasn't been the case yet. And most fighters, it hasn't been the case for, especially in MMA, where you don't get hit as much as you do as if you're boxing. Even in the practice room, where Dan Henderson is the hardest puncher that's ever punched me, I'm real careful. If I took a shot harder than I thought I should have, or harder than, is registering, I'm real careful at making sure I don't have any of the symptoms. I'll take some time off. I'll let my brain rest a little bit because I've got two of everything, but only one brain. I can't afford to let it get hurt. So I've always been very careful with every injury, every potential injury I've sustained.
If my son wanted to get into MMA or something, and that my concern would be, because they've talked about it for years, where boxing is probably more of a dangerous sport on the brain than actual MMA, because you get knocked out in MMA versus having 10 seconds to stand back up and then take the damage again, sort of thing. But the micro traumas, now the little dings to the head. So I'm a combat veteran, and for guys like myself who are on like large cannons, I was an infantryman and also worked on a 120 mortar. And so it's a huge cannon. And so as a gunner, your head is in that eyesight next to the cannon when the round goes off. So it gives you like this, it's not a concussion in the sense where you're blacked out or you can't remember something and you're left with days of symptoms afterwards. It's just the accumulative effect, if I can speak correctly, the accumulative effect over the course of many, many, many rounds of doing that begins to cause people effect that can equate to what otherwise becomes known as a traumatic brain injury, right? But
yeah,
so yeah,
MMA
is that not a concern for you?
It's a concern, but it's a weighed concern. And I mean, MMA is a new sport. We just, I think UFC is now 30 years old. I think we just hit the 30-year mark. And so the fighters that have been getting brain damage for a while haven't aged into it yet. So it is something that we're going to definitely know more about here in the next 10 to 20 years. But as it is right now, we're still learning. We are careful with what we spar with and who we spar and how hard we go. And most of the time you take your lumps at the beginning of your career. Once you're one of the better guys in the room, you're not getting hit nearly as much. Again, not bragging about myself, but I am now the best in most rooms. There's not many people that hit me very much. And so I can spar more because I'm not getting hit nearly as much. And then again, it's not something I'm really concerned about because I've had so long of doing it and I've learned how to take it. I learned what hurts and I'm careful with it. If ever I feel that punch that comes a little too much, rings my bell a little bit too much, I take that step back. Sorry, I'm not going to do anything else for a while. I'm going to lower my heart rate for a couple of days. And it's a lot of preventative measures. You wear the headgear and all that, but it's a lot of you let your body heal itself if ever you think something's going a little awry.
Yeah. So being within the same, I guess, training vicinity or training with Dan Henderson, and then also there's other guys, right? Like Sean Strickland, I believe you've trained with, or I don't know if you actively still do, but yeah. So just like, champions, right? Like nothing too big, nothing too fancy, except for, the greatest on the planet. And so being able to train with some of the greats, and like you said, you being one of those that kind of go up into that higher echelon in terms of MMA fighting career and stuff like that. Like, what is the mentality like when you surround yourself around some of these guys? Like, because fighters can be like, I don't know, fighters can be kind of animals, right? There's a certain dog to them and then there's also great insight in there. All of them have this thing that's in common where they show up day in and day out and they do hard things every day. What is it like to be in a room full of a bunch of people that show up day in and day out? They're doing hard things on a daily basis. They're challenging themselves to do hard things. What is that like to be in that environment?
It depends on the person. Most good fighters are fairly humble because they've all been humbled. I've always said, the world would be a better place if everyone got punched in the face once or twice. And I truly do believe it. And all fighters have been punched in the face once or twice. Now, Sean Strickland, one of my good friends. I love him. But he is a hard spar. He is the guy whose humility, he doesn't get punched in the face all that often. His humility could use some tweaking, but most fighters are very conscious of who they're working with, how hard they're going, and they don't want to get hit themselves.
I'm just interested in, as somebody who has never stepped in a cage like that. Walk me through the experience of what it's like, the day of showing up to a fight, the walkout to the cage, the experience of like the crowd shenanigans that are happening during the fight, someone yelling, I won't say the full word because your daughter's right there with you, but kick them in the D, I think is what
Kick them
happened
in the
in one of your
pills, yeah.
fights. Yeah. And so crowd booing, crowd happy, yelling, calling out your name, like the highs and lows of the whole experience of that. Like there's the fight itself, and then there's all the different things that's happening within the fight around you.
I love what I get to do, and I love that there's people willing to pay me to do something I would do for free. So the day of my fights, I'm just loving life. I am on cloud nine. I am as happy a person as it's ever been. Walking out to the cage, I try and make friends with the crowd. I try and make eye contact with specific people that I don't know, just to make sure that they feel like I'm on their team. I love doing stuff with the fans. The UFC Apex came into play around COVID time, and me and every fighter hates that Apex. It is such a garbage place to fight. You're not fighting in front of a crowd. You're fighting in front of a bunch of rich people that rented out, a bunch of Zuckerbergs. You're fighting in front of a bunch of people that aren't the reason you get to do what you do. And it's quiet. There's very few people in there. And I particularly, but a lot of fighters really hate fighting in that place. It just doesn't have, it has the feel of, sparring in your training room. But when you're out there in Australia or Las Vegas or wherever you are, where that crowd is screaming, they're into it. They want to see what you're going to do or what someone's going to do to you. It is just such a breathtaking moment to be part of an atmosphere like that. To have so many people want you to win and have so many people want you to lose. It's so hard to make people understand the adrenaline rush that comes to you while it's happening. And I'm addicted to it. It's one of the reasons I'm getting older. I'm 37, but I don't plan on retiring anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that would come up for me is I would imagine it would be addictive. I would imagine like the endorphin, the dopamine rush would be so incredible that just even like I said, there's there's the crowd shenanigans and the stuff you got to do with and people doing random Ric Flair chants and stuff. But so there's fights in the crowd, all that stuff. But yeah, like walking out to the cage, it seems like fighters are like some fighters are trying to be as reserved as possible and trying to save that energy. And some fighters don't care. They're like, this might be the last time I ever experience it. I'm going to celebrate right now, walking out to the cage as if I've already won the fight. So it's interesting to see that.
That has always been me. I tell everyone, people that often enough, I get asked for photos, I'll be in Walmart and say, they'll recognize me. And they all say, I didn't want to ask because, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. I said, listen, ask every time. I know there will come a point in my life and nobody cares who I am or what I've done or, what I have to say. But that point isn't today. That point today is people still are interested by me. And that I get to be celebrated like that, doing something I just cherish and love. It's such a cool feeling.
The longevity of your career, like you said, over 80 plus fights. I thought it was like 54 pro MMA fights, but maybe from my research, but
counting amateur fights, and I've actually got a bunch of pro Muay Thai fights as well.
So all this experience and still you have the desire to keep going and keep pushing. How do you continue to find longevity in a sport that like kills people's careers relatively quickly?
Part of it really is, it's a simple reason, is I'm bigger than people. I'm 230 pounds and I'm athletic. There's not many people in the world, let alone my practice room, that can really hurt me. Accidents happen and all that, but for a long time, I've been one of the bigger guys in any room. So I'm going against a lot of guys that are smaller than me, which means I don't get hit as much or as hard. And it's kind of a lame reason because being bigger isn't something you can work at.
I wish it was.
Getting small. Yeah, I know, right? That man. I wish I had less of it. It is so hard for me not to get bigger. But it really has played a factor in the longevity of my career. Is I am bigger than most people. And now I've been doing it for so long, even people that are my size, I'm just better than. So I'm still not getting hit all that or that often or hurt in many, many ways. Things that are happening is I broke my foot again backstage before my fight. Did this last time. I got headbutted in the fight, but before that, 20 minutes before I stepped on the stage, stepped into the pit, I broke my foot. And so stuff like that will play an effect. And this foot I've been nursing for a minute, but I'm in a boot and all that most of the time right now. A lot of times it's just, I got to give myself time to heal if I do get hurt. And I've been blessed with being big, which helps with the not getting hurt part.
So yeah, it's like that's one part that you can't really teach, right? Is size at least in height, you can't teach, which I wish you could. If you had that lesson, teach me. I could use it. But what you can't teach is what you just said. You break your foot before your fight. So there are people and other, like, there are a lot of fighters who would just say, okay, I can't show up, right? Tyson Fury, best boxer on the planet, gets a cut on his eye and he's like, okay, the fight's off. Sorry, man. Like, we're not fighting now, and that happens in other sports too. If it's a marathon and somebody has a cold before a marathon, then they're all depressed about it because now they can't run the marathon. I'm not that guy, but I'm interested in how you show up despite an injury before, because that's the mentality I think that goes into the longevity of your career.
About 13 days before my UFC debut, I got a cut under my cheek that took about 8 stitches to put together. I took the stitches out like as I was getting onto the plane. My wife is taking them out then, just trying to hide it. I wore makeup throughout the week. I tried to make sure nobody could see it. I love what I do. I'm gonna get injured. It's going to happen, and I have to find a way to work around the injury. I've had fights where I fought Taslatus with literally only one leg. Like, I could do nothing but swim for the entire camp. I had a fight where I fought with a broken wrist. My first fight with Patina'd Combat, I also had a broken foot. They're just one of those things that if I were to take time off every time I got hurt, I wouldn't be able to do what I love to do so much. A lot of times, once you start letting injuries win, once you start recognizing them and, really paying attention to them, you start getting more. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy that's always complaining about broken this or broken that. I'll be a guy that actually breaks it and then doesn't tell anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like that's been something that you've like adapted over the course of years? Because I imagine maybe 12-year-old Sam Alvey doesn't do the same thing.
I hope not. 12-year-old Sam is really as strong as athletic as adult Sam is.
Yeah.
But it must have been something I've adapted to. I've always, up always. So I've always in my head, I'm super tough always. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but I know I am now. And it was just something you had to do. My dad was tougher than I'll ever be, and I'm hoping I'm tougher than my kids will ever be. But I'm hoping they try and prove it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if they have a response to that. But how do you guys feel like? You guys going to be tougher than your dad?
You guys going to be tougher than Dad? Ivo Crosby? Hey, I don't know. How about you, Ray? You going to be tougher than Daddy? Yeah, maybe. You guys got to get cocky. Say, yeah, I'm gonna always be tougher than you. I'm going to break you, old man.
All right, Sam. Well, I'm incredibly blessed to have you on this podcast, man. What a gift. And thank you for honoring me by being on the Patina'd Podcast. I hope the listeners, even with just your last answer, with the mindset of continuing to push through despite injury, and you don't even need to shout it out to everybody. Like, You don't need to brag about it. You don't need to tell everybody about it. Hey, before the fight, this happened. But in fact, you kind of even keep it to yourself in this humble way. And so, yeah, I really respect you, man. Best wishes to the rest of your career and karate combat. I really appreciate having you on.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me on, sir.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was A Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.